In the interest of everyone's time, I'm going to get started. I'm Carrie Hopkins-Isles, and I am the Deputy Director for ICU DDR. And if you haven't joined us before, this is our online learning problem-solving group. And we call it that because what we want to do is, well, Susanna and today we're lucky to have Claudia here. Well, they'll present some information and ideas. We also want all of you to ask questions, to present concerns or problems that you have, to present ideas, to help one another. So we really like to collaborate and try to come up with ways to solve problems that people are having, whether it's you're just doing online things because of COVID and crisis mode, or maybe you're moving programs to online, or you haven't taught online before, or whatever it may be. So we've had a couple really great sessions, and I'm excited for today. So I'm going to shush and let you guys do your thing.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm just briefly introduce Claudia Nash, which is my Open University. She holds a PhD in Education and Development, and she is a professor at the Portuguese Open University since 2010 in the Department of Education and Distance Learning, of which she is the current head. So she's my boss now, but she's a nice one. Since 2017, she is the coordinator of the Master in Administration and Educational Management, having had other relevant functions at the WAP's bodies. She's also a researcher at LEAD, which is the Laboratory of Education and Distance Learning, and has vast experience as a researcher in funded at national and international European level projects. Her research interests are in educational policies and new forms of educational regulation, both in national and international context, especially the role of the European Union. Recently, her research focus is on exploring training scenarios in digital environments, especially driven to schools management and leadership in Portugal and in Europe, and in exploring theories of complexity in scholar administration and management. So this is around these issues that she's going to present us today and motivate our discussion, further discussion around the theme of the leadership of professors and in a complex and digital environment. Claudia, please. Thank you for coming and for joining us. You must unmute yourself.
She's actually unmuted, but we still can't hear her. That might be a microphone on her end issue.
Hello? Good. Sorry. This is not my usual platform. I usually use the Zoom one. So this one I usually use for my kids' school meetings. So it hasn't been for a while.
So trust me, we understand.
Platforms, too many Zooms, too many.
Yep. And we are not able to use Zoom, unfortunately, anymore due to our funding, like the funding source. We couldn't use Zoom. So I prefer it as well, but
yeah, a little bit friendly, I think, to use.
But it fits with our theme, right? We have to roll with the punches of the online issues that come up.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. So thank you so much for inviting me, Susanna, my colleague. I'm not here as your boss, so everybody you can be as peaceful as you'd like. Today, what I wanted to talk to you about was a little bit about my research interests and my actual what I'm doing today. I'm leading a department, an education department. So all these ideas that I want to share with you are kind of mixed in my research and my professional performance nowadays. So will I be able to share some slides? Yeah, I think so.
I've just made you the presenter, so you should be able to.
Okay. Can you see them? Okay, good. So, as you might know, what I'm going to talk to you, well, as you might know, you don't know, you're going to know from now. What I would like to share with you are some ideas about why do I choose the complexity theory to understand social systems. And I'm going to share with you why I think it's important to understand educational realities as complex systems in order for us to develop better leaderships. And as leaderships, I mean each one of you, not just the top leadership, but also the intermediate leadership, professor leadership, and even students as leaders. So this journey that I'm proposing to you will start by a brief understanding of what it is, the complex phenomenon, and how it has become so important to understand educational scenarios. I would also like to share with you some ideas about leadership in complex educational environments, and within these environments, the digital ones. So the importance of for us to talk about and to reflect a little bit about the leadership in digital environments, especially because recently we've had a disruptive experience with the COVID-19 and the emergence of digital scenarios that we all had to cope within our lives. So my perspectives are a little bit more positive, so I'm going to share with you some opportunities for educational leadership from this turbulence period that we have been living on. So these perspectives related to complexity are in fact increasing in educational research. The classical science was based on the idea that the scientist's job was to discover laws and rules that explain certain processes. So that an adequate mathematical model could be built, and from there on be able to determine the evolution of the systems based in universal laws. This positivist and deterministic paradigm is suitable for explaining static systems in balance. But when it comes to explaining unpredictable and uncertain systems, such as our system, the living system, it reveals an almost total inability to explain it and understand it. This is because for a living system, it is very difficult to define a general equation that defines its evolution and that explains its behavior. Living systems are systems that develop alternating states of balance and states of disorder and chaos, and they give rise to uncertain and unpredictable behaviors. And this is the complexity that I'm talking about and which defines the complex systems. The attempt to understand the complexity of systems began in physics, and today we can talk about two types of models, the linear systems and the non-linear systems. The linear systems are represented by equations, as I previously mentioned, that try to represent a certain reality through physical and mathematical formulas. The nonlinear systems are not represented by mathematical formulas because the variables of influence are complexity can take the form of complex objects or situations that can be identified by some particular characteristics, namely imprecision, risk, instability, ambiguity, uncertainty, and unpredictability. So, the living systems are predominantly nonlinear temporal dynamics, which means that these systems can be sensitive to external disturbances. Thus, predicting the future behavior becomes extremely difficult. However, living systems, although unpredictable in the long run, have a certain determinism that allows their organization in view of a certain purpose, a certain goal. From this notion, we understand that the complexity of a living system tends to increase through a complex organization between the elements of the system. This is a characteristic of the living systems and consequently of social and human systems. In a general perspective, what the complexity paradigm proposes is a different view of the world as an separate whole, and whatever knowledge we developed, it must be necessarily based on multidisciplinary perspectives. So, a system is made up of independent parts that interact and mutually transform each other. Therefore, the system is not defined by the nature or by the sum of its parts, but by the properties originated from the interactions within the system. The isolated study of each part of the system does not allow us to understand what the system really is or how it's going to develop. So what about education? Based on these perspectives, we assume that a phenomenon is complex when the interactions between the elements are so many that it is not possible to understand the phenomenon through simple descriptions of its components. The complexity lies in the fact that the components of the system interact, and through this interaction, they change the system and they change themselves, creating unpredictable scenarios. It's what we call the butterfly effect. While complexity theory has been used to describe and explain school reforms, there's a lack of research to understand how complexity theory could be used as a theoretical framework for designing and implementing a strategy for educational leadership transformation. The most recent trends in the analysis of leadership point to an understanding of leadership as a process that channels the energy from people who are in the social system in an organization where numerous interactions take place. If we consider the practice of educational leadership as an influential act where affection, actions, and power can influence the other elements of the system, an analysis of educational leaders based on the dimensions of complexity and complex human systems can be of great use. For the necessary transformative change of a system, there must be a kind of disequilibrium, external turbulence, and internal challenges to generate adaptive change for a transformation to occur. Such as Kushner and McQuillan say, if the system elements continue doing what they had always done, there's no transformation. In this sense, education is complex, unpredictable, and the target of many internal and external influences at different levels. Leadership should be not only a management exercise, but also a leadership exercise. The external and the internal contextual variables are fundamental to analyze these plans. This is the reason why some authors warn for the need to carry out analysis of the most sophisticated educational systems that allow us to understand how certain approaches work and why they work in certain contexts and not others. These sophisticated analyses assume the cultural aspects and their dynamics are addressed, such as Harris and Jones state. But what is leadership in complex educational environments? Regarding educational leadership, the research approaches that have been developed are, in fact, too narrow. They reduce the phenomenon of leadership, reproducing a vertical relationship between leader and followers. The complexification of the context that I previously mentioned to you, in which the leadership process occurs, does not seem to have inspired many changes in research over the past decades. On the contrary, what we have seen is circumscribed as approaches at micro level of leadership, focusing on the profile, the type of leadership, even though captured from different levels of organizational hierarchy. Old styles and typologies of leadership are revived, and casual relationships between types of leadership and results are confirmed. And the macro political level and mesopolitical cultural level effects on the reconfiguration of leadership are not revealed. As Keshner and McQuillan state, understanding the collective response to disruption is the status quo reveals whether systems elements now interact in different and perhaps more adaptive ways. So, exchanging information and empowering participants in decentralized networks offers a mechanism for distributing leadership that also strengthens relational trust, system interactions, and simultaneously expanding organizational possibilities. If the network structure is highly centralized, the systems are unresponsive and vulnerable because of the limited autonomy and the lack of ability to respond creatively to obstacles. On the other hand, if the system is decentralized, then they are more flexible and adaptive to change. But there's an important aspect when we analyze complex social systems that we must take into account when we're studying the variable that constitutes the action of education leaders. Even though complexity theory defines emergency as a characteristic of complex systems, in complex human systems, there's something called attractors that can weaken the emergence of outcomes. These attractors act as magnetic forces that materialize in given trajectories. Culture is considered to be one of these magnetic forces because it's a framework of beliefs, values, symbols that constrain the way individuals see and act upon reality, and they act as a logic for how things are done. So, educational leadership is more than action of a single individual. It's a very complex process where several interactions dynamically occur over time. But what, in fact, is leadership? One of the greatest findings that can be made when we're analyzing concepts related to social sciences and education in particular is the fact that there is a proliferation of understandings about almost every concept. There's a hardly universally accepted definition, or even mostly agreed. Leadership is also a concept with multiple understandings. As an example, Northhouse accounted for about 65 different ways for classifying the term leadership. But the school education is crossed by a plurality of cultures, by social and ethical divisions that transform it into a micro-political arena. undermined by contestation and conflicts, mismatches, and differentiated expectations, which are considered to be a huge challenge for those who want to manage this complex and unpredictable reality. In this micro arena, it is important to have a specific form of leadership based on all knowledge, skills, aptitudes to lead others, according to authors like Hannah Avolio, Luffens, and Harms. These characteristics should prepare leaders to face complex challenges and have a positively influence on their followers. Leadership is currently conceptualized as a set of knowledge, skills, abilities, attitudes, behaviors that are developed through relational processes between leaders and followers to achieve common goals. But another concept that has been emerging in the context of organizational management is the concept of e-leadership. There's a set of concepts that have been discussed when we talk about e-leadership, just like digital leadership skills, electronic leadership, digital competence, digital leaders, etc. Given the amount of concepts connected to leadership, there's clearly a need to understand and align the several definitions presented in literature in order to establish a global idea that fits the concept of e-leadership in educational environments. E-leadership is focused on the dichotomous dynamics that exist between information communication technologies and leadership. That is to say, how communication and information technologies influence leaders and how leaders can influence a reality dominated by communication and information technologies. In 2014, Avolio et al. Tried to understand these dynamics and tried to define an e-leadership concept that illustrated its complexity. So they defined e-leadership as a social influence process embedded in both proximal and distance contexts, mediated by advanced information technology that can produce a change in attitudes, feelings, thinking, behavior, and performance. However, this interrelation view of leadership with technologies is not consensual. Some authors consider that there is no influence of technologies in the characteristics and practices of leadership. Others say that technologies have removed emotions and feelings that diminish the role of leaders. There are also some authors who state that the way leaders use information and communication using technologies can change their own ways of leading, including the digitalization, which can improve the effectiveness of leaders, according to these authors. An unquestionable fact is that the use of technologies in education dynamics requires less face-to-face relationship, and this reality is not only unstoppable, but inevitable for the action of educational leaders, as we all have witnessed in previous months. But building an educational leadership that is technologically efficient does not just mean equipping schools with computers, nor giving classes using them or another technological device. To lead an educational institution technologically is to extend technology to all levels of education by stimulating and encouraging everyone in these dynamics. One author, Brown, in 2014 stated that the best recipe for achieving this reality is the alignment of leaders with the constructivist methodology, calling for leaders to always be integrated in professional learning networks as a part of a good practice approach to improve the effectiveness of learning networks, as a part of a good practice approach to improve effectiveness of technologies in education. In this sense, The first good practice to be developed by a leader who wants to be technologically efficient is to adopt the constructivist methodology as a teaching learning method. According to this idea, there's no knowledge without experience. And this approximates theory to practice. With constructivism, technology can be used in education to facilitate learning, but also to increase the technological skills and competences of everyone, because everyone is self-regulated in this process, interacting socially to remain adaptable to the unpredictable challenges. But what characterizes the reality of today's schools is the exact opposite situation. The teaching and learning processes is teacher-centered. Knowledge is something external to students who, through the teacher's action, have access to it. So another of the tools that Brown considers to be fundamental for an educational leader to be technologically efficient is to belong to professional learning networks or learning communities. This belonging allows access to a set of resources and experience that enhance chances of professional growth and development, contradicting to a certain tendency towards professional isolation. Accessing all these online learning experiences is something even more positive because through online training, it is possible to fully integrate technological skills in educational practice. The biggest challenge is to align this learning in digital environments with authentic, real, and contextualized learning. It's important not to believe that one size fits all. So being an e-leader in an educational context is therefore more than transposing the leadership of teams from physical environments to virtual and digital environments. The e-leader should make a great effort to change attitudes and the ability to act in complex environments. We cannot consider e-leadership as a simple extension of the traditional concept of leadership, but as a different way of leaders and followers to relate to each other. So, an ability to manage relational boundaries is needed in going beyond the traditional dimensions of time and space, always considering cultural barriers. E-leaders must be prepared to ensure sharing spaces of virtual collaborative environments to ensure team synergies through human support and technical support. As I like to call them, I think we are in need for culturally responsible e-leaders. What happened in previous months? So it's what I usually call the turbulence, the disruption, and then the emergency of opportunities. If we assume the disruptive nature of this pandemic and the impact that it had on our routines, on the way we relate to each other, how we work, how we teach, how we learn, I believe that it's important to revisit some of the problems that have characterized our society in recent decades. We should try to build a new understanding of the educational reality in order to emerge important changes in the way we think and act. Assuming that what we are living now is an experience new and with unpredictable results and with a tremendous impact on the reorganization of our social and educational life, I believe that we have to rethink old practices and allow the emergence of new solutions for innovative and creative responses. There are obviously very structural problems in all education systems around the world, which have become more evident in the past months, but we cannot continue to develop the same logic and the same responses expecting things to work and change. As Peter Drucker once said, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. When this pandemic emerged, a stress test also emerged for the capacity that evaluated the capacity of institutions to respond to the complex and unknown phenomena such as this pandemic. The institutions, the educational institutions, revealed serious weaknesses. In universities, the pandemic left two major weaknesses uncovered. On the one hand, the inadequacy of its organizational and pedagogical models to a variable geometry of presence, distance, and the synchronism and asynchronism. Universities were not prepared to face that. On the other hand, a notorious pedagogical incapability to establish non-classroom forms of teaching and learning. But the closure of schools and universities forced for an urgent transition to teaching and learning using computers and internet. And suddenly, we all realized that in the first weeks, most of the families and students did not have the technological conditions to make this situation possible. Criticism quickly emerged, as well as some initiatives to address these shortcomings, both private and publicly, but the problem is far from being solved. The current situation and the solutions found to keep educational scenarios functioning have shown that there are great inequalities between families and students that we are not all in the same conditions to adapt to remote teaching and learning. This finding is not surprising, but it became much more evident with the pandemic. Regardless of this inequality, educational institutions have reorganized themselves in their ways of teaching and learning using internet and various digital media available platforms, WhatsApp, email, etc. So the teaching and learning contexts have changed in educational settings that had to work digitally to communicate, to teach, and to collaborate between teachers, students, and the context now is so different that resources and actions are also different. And we access information in a different way as we share it. This means that resources, activities, materials cannot be the same. Today, we may even have favorable conditions to explore innovative solutions, new creative solutions. But if they're not transposed to the system and become normalized, then there will be nothing more than isolated practices and experiences. Innovation must be underpinned by a culture of innovation that, although we are living in a unique moment, the digital transformation is not only digital, it must also be cultural and social. To transform is not just to transit, to assume permanent disruption. We have recently seen many discourses stating that digital skills are needed, digital competences are needed. But how do we manage to have digital skills like collaboration and interaction in virtual environments without knowing how to do them in analogic environments? The digital cannot be separated from everything else as if it was something compartmentalized and separate. Competences, skills, whether digital or otherwise, have a human and social dimension, and we cannot have a purely instrumental function for them. But one thing is certain, whatever the skills and competences we need, they're only valuable if they're operational and capable of producing innovative and creative responses to new situations. Digital skills, leadership skills cannot be separated from other skills. for they are also complex, transversal, multidimensional cultural skills and they can result from complex social practices that force the emergence of these skills as the current situation. So, what I share with you are some ideas about how to understand complex educational scenarios, such as the ones we are living since March 2020, when something like a butterfly in China changed the whole country's ways of perception about education, relation, economy, social interaction, etc., etc. For me, to change leadership in educational settings must be a cultural transformation. So understanding the reality that we are living today as the perfect storm to begin this transformation. I'm not going to shut up because I really want to get some reactions from you, or some questions or some reflections that you would like to share with me or with all the colleagues. So the debate is now open for comments, questions, and some discussion ideas.
Thank you so much. We have quite a few people who joined us when you were getting started, so,
sorry.
No, it's great. So if anyone would like to ask any questions or comment, we would love to hear from you. I see some of my friends and students.
So sorry about the English, but it's Portuguese and English are two very different languages. So the way we pronounce words so different that sometimes it seems like the tongue is stuck. And
you did amazing. You did amazing. I can't speak any other languages, so you're doing great.
You don't need to, probably.
So, let's see who I feel like everyone is hiding. Maybe can you turn off your screen share and we can see if anyone would.
I prepared some questions.
Oh, even better.
Food for thought for you.
Great.
One of the questions that I would like to share with you is, will universities ignore the opportunity for renewal that this pandemic offers them? If they do, will they not open the door to the hyper-liberal and Uberized university solutions that are being announced? Do you think in your universities that the leadership preparation programs within universities produce better leaders? What should be done to develop sustainable leadership in universities? And one thing that I really would like to know is how our collaborative interaction is happening in your institutions, from leadership examples, or are they spontaneously emerging? How is it happening now that we are all working digitally? Do you consider yourself a leader in your institution? If anyone would like to catch some of these questions.
They know I'll start calling them out if they don't volunteer themselves, so. Fatima, what do you think?
Hello.
It's great to hear you.
Hello, Carrie. Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi. Well, I just joined about 5 minutes ago. I went out for an assignment.
Fine.
Okay, fine. But I just I saw one of the questions talking about leadership in the university, especially after this. Am I there?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, especially after the pandemic period. Okay, you see, in order to be able to get achieve a good leadership in the university, especially now that we are working digitally, one, the program must be very friendly to the students, must be very easy to understand. For For example, I just joined a program last month, an online university program in guidance and counseling, which I have not done. So it's a master's degree in guidance and counseling. And they sent me all the documents. And since those times that they sent the documents to me, nobody has asked me anything. They said I should keep reading on my own. So, you know, it wasn't easy for me, but I said, okay, I can try. What of other people who may not be able to read on their own? So in universities, in order to be able to get good leadership, to be able to achieve, you know, or maximize success in student participation, I think program must be student friendly. The people who are the organizers in the university too must put the student interest in their heart, such that at any time a student needs help, they will quickly come to the rescue. You don't leave the students on their own to do their work on their own, like I am passing through now, you know. So this is what I see concerning the activities in the university after the COVID-19 or after this pandemic. A lot of us are left on our own. We have to work, you know, throughout. We have to look for our own materials. We have to teach ourselves. You know, I'm not enjoying this, really. Thank you.
Yeah, you bring up some really great points. Thank you. And thank you for letting me volunteer you.
Yes.
May I add something? Oh, okay. Maybe we can have another question and then I'll comment. Okay?
Can I speak, please?
Yes, please.
Okay. I want to thank you for your brilliant presentation. Like the Fatima rightly said, that the program has to be followers friendly. And if you look at the domains of learning, we have cognitive, we have affective and psychomotor. So as a leader, there's a need for you to be able to bring all these domains of learning for your followers able to learn very well. And at the same time, the materials should be more or less like attractive so that the participant can able to look at it. Looking at your own presentation today, there are a lot of diagrams, there are a lot of things to portray your points. So in the information or pass the information as a leader, you should be able to bring some things that will interest the followers. That's just my only two comments for now.
Thank you.
Well, I will comment Fatima's intervention and then Claudia comment on Peter, because it's more directed to leadership. Is that okay, Claudia?
I didn't quite understand the last question because there were some interruptions, but well, I think both of the previous comments kind of focused on things. So such as the educational relationship, whether it's pedagogical or emotional relation, it has to be a two-way street. So to work digitally and to lead digitally, we cannot just provide people with resources and activities and then leave them on their own. No. If you want to work digitally, you have to, obviously there's a student-centered learning, but you have to be a mediator. The leader, the professor must be a mediator, and it must be present and give a constant feedback to the students' activities. So learning on your own, it's not giving students the material or activities and then say, just do it on your own. No, the teacher, the professor must be always present and giving feedback about the activities that are developed. Otherwise, there's no need for him to be there or her. When you talk about the last question, I didn't quite get it because I didn't listen to everything. I don't know if it happened to you, but there was a cut in the sound and I didn't understand it.
Do you want to say it again?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, I was just appreciating you for your brilliant presentation, and I'm also telling you that when you talk about teaching learning in university, it has three domains, which has to do with the cognitive domain, the affective domain, and the psychomotor, which I've expressed in my earlier comments. And I'm trying to bring up a point that the material must be friendly, in the sense that the way you package all those information you want to send to your followers or your students must be friendly to the extent that they can be able to understand using diagram, using charts, using all those things to buttress your point. It will enable them to be able to learn faster and better when you put a lot of diagrams and all these things in there. So what I'm trying to say, to buttress what Fatima said earlier on, is that apart from having this kind of a good relationship with your followers, the materials you're also presenting to them should also be more attractive to them. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, and you're right. It must be. You have to change. Well, the relationship is there, whether you're in physical environments, face-to-face educational environments, or digital environments. The relationship, the pedagogical relationship is there. So you cannot transpose. You cannot do the same thing you're doing in the classroom. So you have to change your resources, your activities, because you're right, they must be attractive, and the internet is full that can make learning happen in a more attractive way. So you can share videos, you can do PowerPoint presentations, and not just give a bunch of books or papers for the students to read. So as I said, activities must be different. They must be properly developed in digital environments, but also the presence of the teacher as a knowledge mediator must be different as well. You have to be present. You have to give constant feedback to students. Otherwise, they'll feel alone and they'll be uninterested in the activities. So thank you very much for your comments.
Yeah, thank you.
Please, let me just add that something that is important. There are different pedagogical models with different theoretical orientations and backgrounds. Some of these pedagogical models are more centered in the interaction between students and contents only. I'm thinking about, for instance, MOOCs. There are massive open online courses. In this kind of programs, there are no presence of the professor. There are no interaction between students, or few interaction between students, because the focus is the interaction between content and students. So this is quite similar what Fatima told us. Yeah. And maybe it's the case, maybe it's the orientation, and it's like this because it's meant to be like this. And it's okay that, as Claudia said, it's not expectable that one size fits all. So MOOCs are not suitable for everyone. So maybe you must look for some other offers that are more convenient and more friendly to you, and that are more suitable to your expectations also.
Yeah, but it's important.
Thank you.
Important for you to engage in these situations like you're in a community of learning. If you feel like you are in a community of learning, even if it is virtual learning, the sense of belonging will be much stronger. I mean, you don't have to expect for the professor to do everything. Even your colleagues can help you and interact with the resources and the activities. So that's something that distant education allows in adults, for adults, which is the interaction between peers. That's why when I'm stating that the digital, an e-leader will never be an efficient e-leader if he himself doesn't engage in these kinds of learning communities, in digital learning communities, because learning is an interaction, is a complex process where different people, different persons interact. So if you believe that you are in a learning community where there are lots of people with your needs and your expectations, then it will be easier for you to help each other to learn. And that's what I think it's the perfect opportunity that this pandemic offers for us. It's the way to change how we learn and not just be receptors of learning from a teacher, from a professor. If anybody has more questions or comments.
Another thing is, if we have a couple minutes left, so Susanna, do you want to mention what we're going to talk about on our next session on November 16th?
Yes, we are going to approach the questions related with technologies and platforms and that kind of tools that can help us as a teachers to design diverse e-activities and engaging our students and building our learning, teaching and learning virtual communities.
Thank you. And that's going to be November 16th at 11 a.m. EST. So and I'll send you all the links, so you'll be invited to join us for that. Dr. Francis, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I have something. Thank you very much for the presentation. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me?
You're very faint. You're hard to hear.
Okay. Are you hearing me?
Yes, that's better.
Yes, I say that we have come a long way from the culture of face-to-face learning, and now with this digital learning. I want to have an idea of the factors in the face-to-face environment that are lacking in the digital environment, and how such factors that are in the face-to-face environment can now be encouraged in the digital environment in order to make the learning effective. Have we done such a kind of a thinking to bring out some of these ideas?
Thank you.
If I understood well, you wanted to know what's my opinion on the face-to-face relations that or features that can be used, and how can we use them in digital environments? Is that your question?
Yes, factors in the face-to-face environment that are lacking in the digital, and if they can now be incorporated in the digital to make it effective.
Yeah. Well, one of the factors, the obvious one, is the relational factor. You see, how can we interact? How can we use the emotional side of the human being in the digital scenarios? And there are lots of resources to do that. You can use forums, you can use chats, you can use lots of channels to create a dialogue between the students and between the professors and the students. That's one of the things that's lacking in face-to-face, because physical relationship is different from virtual relationship, right? Even though now nobody sees one's faces, even in physical environments, because we all have masks. Now in digital environments, we can see each other's faces, which is very good because we can see facial expressions. But one of the difficulties is the relational factor in the learning and teaching process. That's why the digital scenarios don't work as well for children. That's why it's so difficult, because children to be children must be developed in social ways, in physical social ways. For adults, it's easier because we can use some tools that allow us to interact with each other. So interaction is very important to guarantee in digital scenarios. And I think that's the biggest factor that we have to transpose, that we have to overcome when we're talking about virtual learning environments. That's the great obstacle.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely challenging. Well, we're at the hour, so I'm going to let everyone go, but thank you so much for both of your expertise, and we're excited to continue with the series on the 16th of November. So I will send everyone a link to that. And Claudia, will we have access to your PowerPoints? Can I send this out to the group?
Yeah. I'll send it to Susanna, okay?
Okay. Thank you all so much for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you for
Thank
the
you.
invitation.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Boston.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.